Hey there, this is cut from our Linux Unplugged pre-show from episode 426. If you'd like to get content like this every week, become a member at unpluggedcore.com. Well, here's what I figured we'd do. I figured we'd have a little fun right now, and we'd talk about what's going on, because I don't know if I want this in the main show or not. I haven't decided yet. And I'm not sure if everybody is current on what's going on, but Linus Sebastian and his cohort, what's Luke's last name? I can't remember Luke's last name, but they announced on their WAN podcast, their WAN show podcast, that they want to do a challenge of running desktop Linux for an extended period of time. And this came about after talking about the anti-cheat support that's landed for Linux. Linus asked Luke if he's up for a challenge, and I got a clip of that.
Do you want to do a challenge with me?
Oh, okay. Yes.
We each borrow an SSD from the office, and we both try to install Linux on our daily driver gaming PCs at the same time. We see who lasts longer.
So there's clearly a focus on gaming from the very beginning. That's where they're going with this. And there's going to be a punishment for whoever blinks first. And I thought, okay, maybe this is a passing thing. But then they doubled down and confirmed it in the following WAN show the next week that the challenge is, in fact, real.
So the challenge is real. The challenge is happening. Luke and I are going to be switching to Linux on our daily driver machines. This may, in fact, be the last WAN show that I broadcast on a Windows machine for quite some time. And we haven't figured out exactly what the punishment for blinking first is going to be, but whoever goes back to Windows first is going to have to do something. I saw one really good suggestion, dyeing your hair in 4 quadrants, the Windows colors, might be a kind of fun one. It's not permanent, you're not maimed or anything, but it's certainly...
You'd have to run it the whole way out. Basically.
Not the best. Yeah.
You can't shave your head. It would have to be reasonable haircuts and stuff like that.
Yeah. Totally. You're not allowed to re-dye it. That would be ridiculous.
So I'm mixed on this. I think in part it's great, and it's going to be potentially fun for their audience to watch this proceed. And it probably means Linux is going to get a lot of coverage on their various outlets for a few months. But at the same time, they're and Linus in particular is a very, very, very busy individual and probably doesn't have a lot of spare time to muck about with things. And he's coming at this with a real YouTuber lens look on the Linux scene. And I'm a bit nervous by that. I'm also nervous by the fact that Linus, and I think Luke, have never daily driven Linux.
Confession for me to make here. I have never daily driven Linux. Not once. I
think in a lot of ways, it's going to be probably not as bad as you expect, to be completely honest.
I'm not expecting it to be bad. I'm expecting it to have unnecessary bullshit that you shouldn't have to deal with.
One of the best ways...
Windows has lots of that. Just want to say.
Yes.
So maybe it's good. Maybe they have the right expectations. But Wimpy, I know you were biting your tongue before we started. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, if this is a good thing, if this is going in the right direction, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it reminds me a little bit of when you did the Arch Challenge all those years ago, right? It's similar but different. But my concern is with Luke and Linus doing it is everyone is going to come out of the woodwork and offer their advice and their take on it, and I feel like they are just going to get drowned in bias misinformation, and I feel like what they should do is they should each find a mentor to guide them through this. So they should have their trusted mentor each, somebody who's experienced with Linux. I know Anthony, who's on their writing staff, is very experienced, but maybe they each need a mentor in order to sort of minimize the frustrations and help climb the learning curve.
Yeah. In fact, to your point specifically, when they were talking about this, they were taking distro suggestions from their live chat, and Gentoo was on their list, but when Fedora came up, they mocked it.
No, we're not running Fedora. Like, come on, guys, put real serious
you should
suggestions.
get like extra points or something if you run Fedora and wear a fedora for the whole duration.
Oh, good Lord.
And, that's just the YouTube lens, right? Where Gentoo, Arch, and Manjaro are all perfectly very valid and all on the list of contenders.
Yeah, they've all got cool value when you don't know what you're doing, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. What do you think, Popey?
I was going to say similar to Martin about the fact that it's like birds stamping on the ground and all the worms come up, right? I think there's certainly going to be a lot of people coming out. I wouldn't say what Martin did, that people will come out with misinformation. I think they'll just come out with opinions, and there's a 1,000 different opinions in different directions. You should do this, you should try this distro, you should configure it this way or that way. There'll be a lot of that, people spouting their opinions, for sure. I think this is good for everyone. I don't think anyone comes out of this bad, because their channel gets a whole load of eyeballs that they wouldn't have. There's a whole bunch of Linuxy people who are interested. There's Windows people who might be interested in this from I've heard about that, but I don't know what it's going to be like. I'll let them dog food it for me, and we'll find out if it's any good. And what if it's not, right? Why would it not be? It would not be any good if certain things didn't work. But those are facts. Those things don't work because Linus tried them. They don't work because they don't work. And if that's the case, then maybe that will protect some of their Windows running audience from using Linux and then finding out themselves that it doesn't work and getting frustrated. But actually, this will shield those people.
I see it. It sets expectations, essentially.
Right.
I kind of like that idea, that perspective.
So with regards to the misinformation, I didn't mean that people would deliberately misinform them. I just think there's a lot of enthusiastic people out there who are not informed. Yeah. And will share poor quality information.
Yep.
And yes, there are hard facts that some things don't work as well. Like in one of those clips, it was like, this may be the last time I do a live stream using Windows. Well, live streaming from OBS isn't the simple process on Linux as it is on Windows, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can just take for granted on Windows that is not the case on Linux, that you have to go through some extra hoops to get going. So, that could be a point of pain.
Right. Like who knows how he's bringing in his DSLR right now? He could be using the USB interface or something.
He could be using a, Blackmagic deck link or something, and then he's going to be in a real bad place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree a lot with your points. And I think there's the other element of this. I think mostly it's a positive, but I think there's going to be people watching this that expect them to permanently switch to Linux and expect, the channel to become more Linux focused. And I think it is actually a really positive trend to see them talking about Linux more. And the fact that this challenge is even happening means that they think it will drive audience. That's also very telling. But I think we should keep it in perspective. They do have an end goal in mind, and and Linus has been very clear about where this is going.
I think it's going to ultimately be a video series. So part one, I think, has to be like kind of like day one. Like your challenges, deciding which one to get, getting the initial setup done. I think this is something we absolutely have to both kind of submit our experiences for and both talk about. And then past that, I think there's got to be kind of like an update. All right, it's been 2 weeks and I haven't played this game that I really love in 2 weeks, and I'm getting the twitches, like that kind of thing. And then we have to have a conclusion where we kind of go, okay, I've settled in now. I've figured out a lot of my workarounds. Here's where I'm at. I talked about it with James. I think he thinks it should be just 2 pieces of content, but we'll see. But the point is, one of the things that will be included in the first one is a lot of hemming and hawing about which distro to use. So here's what I've got in my list so far. And it's not comprehensive. You guys are going to help me flesh it out here. I've got Pop, Mint, Arch, by the way, Ubuntu and Manjaro.
He later adds Gentoo after the chat room convinces him. But, that's where they're going, right?
Lord.
That's where they're going. They're going for a 3-act kind of story about trying Linux out for a bit. And
have they made a decision about which distro? Is that what's going to come out in the first episode?
I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what their plans are. If you go by the poll, it looks like Ubuntu, which I think is spelled with an O, is winning right now. However, my bet would be they go with Pop just because I think, like Wimpy said, Anthony's going to kind of guide Linus here, and Linus is going to just go with whatever Anthony says to use, I would suspect.
I think that's probably the best choice. I think one of them should go with a distro and the other one should go with a different distro. I think they should contrast their experiences. And I think one should be Pop and one should be Manjaro, personally. That's my personal opinion, is what they should use.
He says, hoping the Manjaro box breaks.
No, actually, I want this to be real world, because look, if you go online and ask people what I want to do gaming, what distro should I use, you will get those two answers. You'll get some people who say Ubuntu, and then you'll get some people who are fervent Manjaro because it's the easy arch, and Pop because it's the better Ubuntu, right? You get those people.
Right.
And those people have very loud voices. And so I think it's a good way for Linus and Liam to show those things off, because that's what everyone tells you to run. So run them and see what they're like.
I think not only do they have loud voices, but the message that they're essentially conveying is it's the easier option. And if you're brand new to this and you want to play video games, right? Hearing that it's the easier option to play video games on Linux, it's the message you want to hear. And I think that's why that plays a role too. So yeah, I could totally see that going in. I think they should do different distros. And then if it doesn't work out for them, here's where I think that's where our role is. Because we're just going to sit back and watch it, right? But
how is it going to fail? What you tell me, in what is a failure mode for this? Like, success is they've got loads of content. That's given, right?
Right.
What is any kind of failure of this?
Well, it's going to be for the Linux audience when they go back to Windows, or when the distro doesn't work out, like Wimp is talking about. Perhaps video capture doesn't work, so they have to switch back to Windows to do a live stream. Like that, I think would be considered a failure by the community.
But this is if he's just like a 2 or 3 episode thing, then I think we should all have in the back of my mind that he's going to go back to Windows anyway, unless somehow magically the timing of Batleye and EAC lines up and the planets align, and they get the right GPU drivers and the right CPU and everything works. They're going to switch back to Windows.
That's a lot of stars aligning.
Right.
What I would consider a win, what I would personally consider a win for Linux users would be if Linus or Luke's home computer remained Linux. I don't expect their work desktop and their whatever, but if their home gaming PC remained Linux, I think that'd be a phenomenal outcome.
So I don't think that outcome is going to happen. No, absolutely not.
I know.
So I think
that is hopes and dreams and pixie dust.
Yeah. The reason for them doing this is because they want to try out Linux gaming now before the Steam Deck becomes widely available, to sort of assess where things are.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that if you've watched many of their videos, Windows is entrenched in their business workflow. There is no way they're going to be moving away from Windows for any, prolonged period of time.
That's just it.
Heck, they use Windows for their file server.
No, they don't. They use Unraid.
They have a Windows storage spaces server too.
And they run it for their VM. I follow what you're saying.
What looks like success to me is if they are successful running the games that they love on Linux, and their experience is the same as or better than what they've had on Windows. I think that's what success looks like, just the gaming angle.
Yep. So for me, what success looks like if they pull it off is honestly that they don't totally hate the experience, right? I actually kind of expect that a good chunk of the games that they play will work. The question is, are they going to like the process in playing them? Are they going to like, how, the experience as a whole? Like, that's the one I'm more concerned about. I don't think they'll stay.
I am thinking
for sure.
it's going to be it's going to be a mixed bag. But one thing that I thought was pretty positive is Luke said he kind of expects it to be something similar or analogous to iOS and Android, where you can get the same apps on both platforms, but the iOS version is almost always better in some way. He expects it to be like that with Windows and Linux. Like, you can get the game or the same app in Windows, and you can get the same one in Linux, but the Linux experience might be a little more Android, and you know, maybe something's a little different, or you got to go manually update it versus maybe something that's automatically updated on Windows. And I think that's not always true, because Slack is Slack for the most part and that kind of stuff. Electron apps are just Electron apps. But it is applicable maybe to Proton games in some aspects of Linux. And so that's sort of setting expectations, I think, at the right level. And that, in my opinion, is probably the most key thing to making a transition like this successful, is setting those expectations right.
I don't know if you guys caught it, but the whole like Fedora thing ended up on Twitter, and Linus did respond to that thread with Matthew Miller in it. It was pretty much an old conception. He hasn't researched that whatsoever, so he's going to look into it more.
That's the ray of hope, is these guys do have industry experience. They know like how the internet works. They grok that like a more niche distro has more niche support. Like they get those fundamentals because they're intelligent individuals who've been using tech for a long time. So there's to that advantage. And part of why I find it fascinating is because I feel like that's exactly the kind of user I think Linux has the best shot with, is somebody who knows what a driver is, somebody who understands that vendors release driver, you know, like the whole just basics of how that stuff works.
They're PC enthusiasts.
Yes.
You know, they've been building their own PCs for years, right? They know how PCs work, which means
do more weird hacks on Windows than you could ever hope to believe.
And they acknowledge Windows isn't perfect too.
I think I've got what the worst outcome for this would be. I think, given that this is a prelude to the Gabe Gear coming out, and this is all like leading up to Linux on the Gabe Gear, then what would be the worst outcome is if the guys have a terrible experience and they advocate and demonstrate when the Steam Deck comes out, put Windows on it. They tell you to just wipe it and put Windows. That's the worst case scenario.
Yep,
because
absolutely.
Right now, the Steam Deck is going to go out the door with Linux on it. And if it's a great experience, then people will just keep it and they'll just use it like that. But if they get signals from people before it comes out that it's going to be shocking, then they may well switch and just go and find a copy of Windows from somewhere and put it on.
The other thing that Linus said was that they made it clear that like Anthony is kind of like their in-house Linux guy from what we can see. They are not going to be falling back on that. They want to get the legitimate end user perspective of just being thrown to this, have no hand holding whatsoever. So it's going to be on them to do all the work.
I don't think that's a good idea.
That to Matthew. They mentioned that to Matthew on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, we gotta do stuff."
I really hope I hope they let Anthony guide that a little bit.
I know it's what normal people do. I'm saying that we're not ready.
And also, they're not normal. Like, Linus is running a media empire. He's an extremely busy person, and so he could probably use a little bit of support in that regard.
Well, yes and no, because this is his home PC, his gaming PC.
True.
Yeah,
so
he's changing his home PC that he does the WAN show on.
Yeah, okay.
Like he also said in there that the WAN show will probably, like going forward, you know, as he is doing this experiment, will be streamed from Linux. That is a big deal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
because it's his home PC. That's what he does the WAN show on.
Yep. Well,
so my point was that he's a busy guy, and at work, he may be busy.
And it's going to stay
his
Windows,
own time, when he's playing games, that's like very clearly the definition of not busy, because he's playing games.
Yeah, he's doing the not work part.
Right.
I think the whole thing is just going to be fun to watch, and I don't see there being really any major negatives. I think it's going to be fun. We can express our opinions of what they're doing right and wrong, and that will get thrown into the mix with all the other million Linux users throwing their 2 pence into what he's doing wrong.
That's one of my concerns. It's going to be the peanut gallery of peanut galleries, and they're going to get subjected to that
Right. Just like game devs, like when they blog about, here's a retrospective of why, what went wrong on Linux. And then people dive in and dogpile them. Oh, you used the wrong audio library, or you should have targeted this distro, all that shit. There. They're going to get that times 10.
But they do. They know how the internet works, though. They do.
Sure.
Know. Yeah. Yeah, if they
didn't know how the internet works by this point, I'd be impressed.
It is going to be fascinating to watch because of all of these reasons, regardless of where it ends up. I say keep expectations low, but pop your popcorn.
I'm just hopeful that at the end of this, no matter what happens, I would just be really excited to see if they came out with a slightly positive outcome. That would be.
I just want them to not have a negative one.
That's baseline. That's baseline.
Yeah, exactly.
I've thought of another negative way this could fail. Yeah. What if it goes so badly that it convinces people not to buy the Steam Deck, to cancel, because at the moment they're all reservations. Then nobody's actually bought one, and
they're going to be getting a call from Gabe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because they're not talking about the Steam Deck here, are they? They're talking about their own homegrown Linux experiences, which is not the curated device.
But it'll influence everything.
Here's an example of how it could go wrong. Here's an example. Perhaps somehow they're convinced, for better, maybe it'd be good, but they're convinced, use Plasma, because Plasma is what's going to be on the deck. They use Plasma, and maybe they develop some sort of problem. They don't like it, for something goes wrong, or they don't like it. And so then when they're talking about the deck in the future, they might throw in there, but it uses Plasma, which blah, 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 blah. You could see something like that perhaps developing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If their end goal was about the deck, do you think one of them would be trying some kind of Arch-based distro, whether it's Arch itself or Endeavor?
Absolutely.
So I believe Endeavor is on the list of things on the selection pile.
Yeah. Well, it was what Anthony suggested.
Anthony's and Endeavor. We don't know what the final list of distros that they're going to select from is going to be yet, because apparently they're just going to start over and do research because of what happened over the weekend.
Way to go, Linux users! We're off to a good start.
To be fair, it was actually largely consistent commentary from almost all of the avenues. YouTube, Floatplane, forums, everywhere was like, "Why are you dismissing Fedora?"
I told Neil, I messaged him. I was like, "I've never seen r/Linux ever be in a hold up state." Consistent across the entire sub.
Everybody was like, I have never seen so much backhanded positivity towards Fedora before.
That's really it's impressive, Neil, because especially after that tragedy where every single Fedora user lost all their data because Fedora uses Btrfs. So I'm impressed that it still has goodwill after all that data loss that happened.
Right. Yeah.
So in Popey's first example of how it could go wrong, he said that they, recommend installing Windows on the Steam Deck. I think we can just take that as a given, because as Linux nerds, we buy devices with Windows and Mac OS on it, and we're not happy until we've got it running Linux. And it's very rare for a Windows-centric group of nerds to get a device that's running something other than Windows and have the hack challenge of installing Windows on it. So I think we can say absolutely positively they are going to install Windows on the Steam Deck.
We should brace ourselves.
Heck, there was those challenges to get, what was it, Windows 95 running on an iPhone 7 years ago?
No,
and
but
things like that?
It's a fair point, and we shouldn't necessarily take it as even a negative thing. It's just natural for a Windows user to want to do that. And just brace yourself. It's going to happen. Don't freak out. It's okay.